Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
This episode of Solo is also being published as part of my other podcast called I'm Not Joking, which looks at the lives of funny people. My guest is a comedy writer, producer, and author of a very funny memoir, What I Was Doing While You Were Breeding. We talk about a wide range of fun topics, including advice for solo travelers and how to pick friends to travel with. We talk about how traveling lets you try out some different personas, and we explore the value of authenticity and honesty in crafting a good story. And she tells me about the times of the year that her book sales spike. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. This is the last of the first 5 episodes that I'm launching on day 1. From this point on, I'll be posting a podcast every 2 weeks with the goal of upping the frequency if people are listening. So be sure to subscribe and rate. Please don't be shy about telling me about what you like and what you don't, and what would you like to hear in future episodes. I'm also looking for great guests. People like the one today, who are impressive, who have lived or living a solo life, and who are making it remarkable. So send them my way. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Welcome to a special dual taping of 2 podcasts. One is I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. The other is my newly launched podcast, Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Kristin Newman. Kristin has been writing and producing television for over 20 years on shows including That 70s Show, How I Met Your Mother, Chuck, Gallivant, The Muppets, The Neighbors, The Real O'Neills, and For the People. She currently has an overall deal at ABC, under which she was most recently producing a pilot for Hulu. She also wrote the comic travel memoir, What I Was Doing While You Were Breeding. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you.
So, Kristin, if you weren't working as a writer or producer, what would you be doing with your life?
That's what we all talk about constantly because we all feel like we're all about to be out of work. And we all know that we have no skills of any sort. We have no skills that are applicable to anything in the world.
Besides writing and producing?
That's right. Like whenever I've written a show that takes place in an office or any sort of business environment, I'll often have dialogue that just says, worky, work, work, work. And then I call a friend who's had a job anywhere and say, what do you say is a fax still a thing? Do you fax things? What happens in an office? So we have no skills. What is interesting is that I have always felt like the only other thing that I can imagine doing, because the only thing I'm really interested in talking about is people and their stories and what they do, is being a therapist.
I think that's so interesting that you say this, because even the show names you have are very people-y shows.
It's always people.
Right?
Not
There's
a show called For the People, for God's sakes.
It's called, exactly. The Real O'Neills, The Neighbors, like Chuck, How I Met Your Mother. These are very
about people. Well, and comedy writers and on TV, if you think about sitcoms, they're really about people just talking to each other, right? Like in a very normal situation that you see all day, every day. And a drama is more a heightened spy, astronauts, sci-fi situation that nobody's really in usually, or, very highly dramatic moments of a doctor's life, a lawyer's life, a cop's life, those kinds of things that most of us don't do all day, every day. And what I found is that, having written on both, in a drama, you have to make sure that the people speak really, really, really the way that we all speak, because the situations are things that we don't do. And in a comedy, you have to have the situation feel really grounded in reality and something that you did yesterday with your wife or your child or your boyfriend. But the way people speak is heightened, right? They're much faster and funnier than any of us are when we're with our boyfriends or our wives or our kids or whatever. So that's kind of the difference. But yeah, so I really only like to tell stories and hear people's stories. So I figured maybe be a therapist, which is, of course, we're all also crazy comedy writers. And so I had a conversation with my therapist about this, and she told me that because she's a therapist in Hollywood, she has a lot of writer patients, and that's what they all either do as their second career when we stop getting work because we turn 40, or what they think they'll do, because I think it's about observing human behavior, both jobs.
Sure, yes.
Being interested in why people do what they do and why they say what they say. And so apparently and I already have 2 different former professional comedy writer friends who have become therapists. Now that we're, getting on.
Getting on in
years.
As
it were.
I think that's interesting, like thinking about like the difference between ER and Scrubs, right? So they're both set in the same location. Obviously, the tone of the show is really different, but the way you talk about the language of the 2 shows.
That's what people really say versus what people don't really say.
Yeah, the Scrubs, super accessible. They talk like regular people.
But they don't. They're way funnier than regular people.
Well, yeah, of course.
Right?
That,
like,
yes.
as every person you meet in the world says, you should hear me and my buddies in the insurance office. If you could just bring a camera to the office, you would have a sitcom. And of course that's not true.
No.
Of course that's not how people speak. Of course it takes a room of 12 to 14 very funny people working till 3 a.m. to write things that are as funny as they are. When we all sit around talking to each other, we're not that funny either. It's a careful, way to have people speak. But in dramas, they sit and chat the way that people sit and chat.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's fair to say. I was thinking about that sort of elevatedness of ER. Like everything feels so.
The drama is elevated, but the words actually are what doctors would really say usually. Right?
Yes, that's fair.
And what people who are next to their dying relative would normally say. They're not making really written quips. If something feels too written in a drama, it stands out. In a comedy, you expect it to feel written.
I see.
Yeah. That's different, though, from network to streaming and cable. Streaming and cable, it's a lot more conversational in the way people sound in real life. And if you do a setup punchline, the way you would do on a multicam, like 2.5 Men or something, it doesn't feel right on, Rami or Smilf.
I see. That's fascinating. So I'm working on a new book, and it's taking a look into the world of comedy and what we can learn from funny people, from stand-ups, improvisers, sketch writers, etc. And one of the things that I talk about are comics are sort of natural anthropologists. They're observing the world, they're noticing the things that normal people don't notice. They're mining that for comedy gold, of course, for insights and so on. And I think in your book, what I was doing while you were breeding, you have a little bit of this, you're, and especially because you're going to all these places. You're in Paris, Amsterdam, you go to Russia, Argentina, Brazil, the Dominican Republic, New Zealand, Australia, Iceland, Israel, Jordan. You're spending time in these other places, interacting with the locals, sometimes quite intensely.
Sometimes with all parts of me. All parts of me.
And not only
you want to be welcoming.
Yeah. Not only intimately, but also like you had an accident in the Dominican Republic. You had surgery to repair your foot. Right?
Will Forte drove over my foot with a car.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a real a-hole.
It was so awful when my heart sank when I read that part of it.
It was real gross.
Of the book.
They degloved my foot, is what he said. Is what the doctor said, that Will degloved my foot with the car. Still real gross too. Very callousy, guys. Very callousy heel still to this day.
And so you did some, so you must have you have a good memory. I know for facts. You also, I assume, you do a little bit of journaling. You mentioned this but you didn't set out.
I actually have a terrible memory, is the truth.
Is that right?
How
did you put all this back together then?
Well, I have a 3-year-old now and I'm old, so it's getting worse for sure. But even then, I sent a lot of emails to people. And keep all of those. So it was a lot of going back to emails and some journaling, although I hope that for posterity, this sticks around for a long time, because I really want to explain to my descendants that when they find my journals and think that I was a miserable person, that they know that I really only journal when I'm miserable. I don't journal when I'm happy, only when I need a pep talk or to work something out. So when I'm dead and you find my journals, you will think I lived a life of misery, but that is not the case. But I do have the miserable moments written down.
Yes.
And then a lot of emails. And then I also took people out to dinner who were on the trips with me, or reached out to them, and, we reminisced, and they reminded me of some details that I'd forgotten, which was also a really good way to get people involved a little bit in the storytelling process, to hopefully make them more comfortable with their lives being written about. Because while I changed names, there's definitely a lot.
Wait, Juan is not Juan?
Juan is Juan. Juan is the one. He is the one who kept his name because there was too much good Juan wordplay. Is he the Juan? He's the hot one,
yes.
Right? All that. I mean, that's gold. That is comedy gold. So you can't be just saying he's the Diego. That doesn't work.
Yes.
But anyway, most people got their names changed, and I let people name themselves.
Oh, nice.
Was one thing I did to hopefully get them involved in the process, and then had them help tell the story, and then gave them the opportunity to kind of redline what they wanted to redline. And nobody did. And I think it was because they were kind of part of it and enjoyed having some of their lives, put down for posterity too, instead of feeling out of control of it. The ones who didn't get to read things and redline because they were ex-boyfriends, they didn't love it as much.
Yeah, though you're sort of, most of the other characters. We should step back for a moment, because the listener is probably going, well, what the hell
What's this book about?
What's this book
You guys
about?
don't know.
So,
it's a comic travel memoir, guys. Every chapter is a book, or every chapter is a trip, and it kind of collectively tells the story of about 12 years of my life, and really all of it, because I talk about the family and friends situation that led up to mostly my 20s and first half of my 30s, maybe first 3/4 of my 30s. Let's call it 20s and 30s.
Okay. And you were in Hollywood writing, and so started off struggling, obviously then started to get regular work. And the nature of this business is you work oftentimes for very intense periods of time. You kind of burn yourself out, and then you are released. It's a very LA thing for people to go on vacation, to kind of leave town, go on vacation.
Hiatus time.
Yes.
Yeah, we say we have 2 seasons, right? Pilot season and hiatus season.
Yes.
And fire season now, the 3rd season.
And so you went off to these places, and sometimes very single, sometimes slightly single. And so you had these cultural experiences.
Single adjacent.
Single adjacent. So you have a term, you call yourself Kristin adjacent. And this is a quote from you. I'm not using, these are not my words. These are your own words. You say, I talk in the book about this Kristin adjacent creature who I am when I'm on the road. She's less judgmental, more open, a little softer, and a little sluttier.
Which, by the way, it's the years that have passed, I don't use the word slut anymore. And the first sentence in my book is, I am not a slut in the United States of America.
Okay.
Which is a great line, if I do say so myself, but I'm sad that I used the word slut in the book. There's certain things that have changed in these last few years that you already regret pretty quickly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And is it just because...
It's a judgy word, right? And there's no word like that for men who have lots of romantic adventures.
Yeah.
There just isn't one, and so it's not
promiscuous.
Cool to use it, really.
Is
but have you ever
word.
heard that word used about a man? You say playboy, you say party boy, you say ladies man.
Man whore is the
closest. But the word
closest.
whore in and of itself is female, right? It's almost like calling a man a pussy, which is also means that a pussy is a derogatory thing to be, right? Or throw like a girl, right? Any of these things. So anyway,
it's too gendered.
It's too gendered, and the word slut is thrown around in my book by me about myself, and now I a little bit regret it.
Okay. Well, now I regret reading your quote.
No, I'm glad you wrote it, because I've never gotten to talk about that, and so I'm
see.
glad I got to talk about that. But anyway, what you were talking about was the Kristin adjacent creature, and that's really true, and was the thing that was the most freeing for me about travel, and why I think for especially people who are younger, or people who are single, or people who are newly single after a long time in a big relationship. I think it's such a good thing, because you get to sort of step outside of yourself and be a little different. I think especially in a relationship, it's hard to change because you have this person who is this mirror all the time, who is saying, what are you doing?
Are
you going through something? Is there a crisis involved? You just cut all your hair off. Are you unhappy? Are you trying to change something dramatically? Why are you saying this? So you get in these ruts almost because it's a little bit embarrassing, or you get self-conscious making a change in front of somebody who's watching you. Mm-hmm. And even when you're not in a relationship and you're single, you've got friends around you to notice too. And when you go someplace and nobody knows you, you can just try on a whole new thing and nobody notices because they don't know it's any different than what you have always been. And that is when you can really grow, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I like the fact that you say you're less judgmental, but you're also in a world that's less judgmental because
Mm-hmm.
they don't know how you were last week or last year or 10 years ago, nor do they care. You're just the person in front of them that you're meeting at that moment in time.
Nobody will ask you what you do for a living. You'll run around, be traveling together all over the world for a week, and nobody knows what you do for work, right? Mm-hmm. Like the kinds of things that we ask about right away in the United States.
Yes.
Just doesn't happen, and it's really all just about experiencing something together and much more in the moment.
So you're the perfect person to be in a dual podcast for my two podcasts, but I was really more interested in how you live this solo lifestyle, because I'm on the lookout for people who either are sort of committed to a solo life and as a result are living their best life, are taking advantage of the opportunity that solo living provides.
Good for them.
Yes.
Good for you guys. You're doing great.
Or may think of their single life as temporary, mm-hmm. that they do have a goal, hard, soft, of partnering up.
And that's the worst way to be single. It's such a bummer, I think. I found that single's great when you want to be single, and single is such a bummer when you're hoping to end being single.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. I think that I don't like this idea that being single is seen as this liminal state.
Mm-hmm, me either.
Right. And so what's very clear to me is that you didn't treat it that way. Mm-hmm. You're like, I am single. I'm going to make the most of this. I'm going to go on these adventures. I'm going to meet these interesting men, these interesting people. I'm going to say yes to things. It's very improv-y of you. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, because I use this term in the description of the project is for the person who's single for now or forever. Mm-hmm. And I just think that there's not really good resources for that person, because almost all the resources for a single person is how do you achieve this state in the future as soon as possible or in some short order. And I think the average person doesn't have a playbook for now or forever. And I think that what I was doing while you were breeding
sounds judgier than it is.
No. Well, look, I like the fact that it's bold, and I like the fact that it's unapologetic. In a world where people are kind of pushing you into that breeder category. And so I'd like it as a playbook, so to speak.
Well, good.
Not for everyone, but,
And also, not to judge the people who are wanting to not be single, because I certainly was not existing throughout this story or throughout my life as somebody who wasn't looking to find somebody. Like, I think I come in and out of that space, certainly mm-hmm. in the book and in my life. And that's why I can speak to how much more fun it is to be single when you're aggressively trying to stay single versus when you're like, all right, maybe I've done this. Can I please maybe find some love? Or can this person who I am chasing after perhaps notice me ever? So I've been in both spaces,
sure.
For sure. And both spaces are super valid. But yeah, I do think that thinking of singleness as a thing that's you're supposed to get over in some way is a bummer. I've been sitting on the book for a long time with people wanting me to adapt it, studios and things, both as a TV show and as a book or as a movie for a long time. And one of the reasons is I can't really decide exactly what to do with it. I don't really want to do it as a movie because if you have to do it in 90 minutes or 2 hours, she has to sort of get over it. And the end, of kind of where I happened to end, because literally when I finished the book, I happened to be selling my single girl house and, moving in with my now husband, which felt like a really adorable by too much ending, but literally was the pages as I was writing the final pages for my deadline for my publisher, that's what I was doing, was packing up my single girl house. And so that's just sort of how it ended. And if the movie ends that way, it feels like, okay, get over it. Get over your thing. And then, oh, thank goodness she got over it and got married. And I really don't want that story. I want it to be several seasons of this very valid life choice, that even though you're 35 and your eggs are drying up and all the things that are happening, that if you're not ready, you're not ready, and that's okay. And you don't need to be put into the panic mode of quick, do it before your eggs dry up. That being said, I can also talk about 2 years of IVF and living in a hospital for 3 months and things like that to get a baby, which also sucked. But I still will never be the person who tells a 35-year-old single woman, honey, better get on that. Did you freeze your eggs? What's happening? That being said, I'm going to give my daughter egg freezing at 22 when she graduates college. So she just doesn't have to worry.
I think that's. I think this is often the case in terms of those kinds of deadlines. That you ought to think about them earlier than you want to.
Yeah.
And then you just don't know what 10 to 20 years later will look like.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. So you were an imperfect choice for this podcast,
right?
Because of the quote unquote happy ending of sorts of the book.
And there was some fury from readers. There was some Reddit strain of people who called themselves CFers, child-free people, who were all mad that I had betrayed the child-free community that I purported to represent, which I really never purported to represent. I mean, but despite the title, I always wanted to have one kid when I was 50. That's what I said when I was 8 years old to my mother. So it wasn't ever that I was like, never will I have children. I just didn't want to do it when everybody told me to do it. So anyway, the CFers are furious at me.
Yeah. Look,
and by the way, they were furious before I even had a baby. They were furious because I inherited 2 stepkids, and that was a betrayal in and of itself.
That's fascinating. I have not stumbled across this subreddit yet, but I'm sure they're going to love Solo.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think I understand the tension. Actually, I had a question that I was like, oh, has this been optioned into a movie? I mean, given the work you do, I was like, well, she could do it herself. Mm-hmm. She doesn't need someone to come along.
Yeah.
And I was going through my head thinking about, well, how do you manage? It reminds me a little bit of Breakfast at Tiffany's. Mm-hmm. So, Breakfast at Tiffany's, the movie has a different ending than the book.
Right.
It has this, she stays with the handsome, kind writer in the movie.
Goes and finds the cat.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And, in the book, she goes off to some Saudi prince or something like that kind of a thing, which is much more in character for Holly Golightly.
Yes.
But, Hollywood likes happy endings. Mm-hmm. On one hand, you have a happy ending. You found love and you found a family, and you didn't have any goals. This was not your life has turned out well. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, people might see it as you were saying, this betrayal of this thing. To me, I don't think it's here or there. I think that this is what happens in life, is we have chapters, and if we're good about closing chapters when that part of the story is no longer serves us.
Yeah. There was definitely, in the book I write about the kind of moment on a beach in New Zealand by myself, with a beautiful waterfall and kind of adventures around me, and going it's been a lot of beautiful beaches. It's been a lot of beautiful men. It's been a lot of waterfalls. I kind of have done it, and there were years where every February or March I would break up with whichever boyfriend was around because hiatus was coming and I couldn't bear to bring them with me to Argentina or wherever, where it wasn't done yet. It just wasn't done yet. And then it was done, and that's okay, that you move on to a new thing. That's the purpose of the book and the message of the book, I hope, ultimately, is that whatever you want is great. And if you wanted to have kids at 22 and that's the adventure that makes you happy, then
sure,
great, have that adventure. Because I have learned, it turns out, that actually, as boring as I found parents when I was single and childless, to actually have a child is actually the most interesting thing I've ever done by a long shot. It turns out it's not boring. It's just boring to hear people talk about children. It's terrible. I'll try really hard not to tell you stories about how adorable and ridiculous my child is because it's super boring. But it is interesting to have kids. And that's actually the show that I'm about to pitch this week. Was kind of a show that shows two lives, and I hope that what it comes out on the side of the goal is that there is no right road, and that both roads have joy and both roads have sorrow. And do you know the Chris Rock joke? He says there's only two options in life. You can be married and bored or single and lonely.
Yes.
And the people get in trouble when they want a third option. He's like, an interesting marriage is if your wife fucks your brother. That's an interesting marriage. But in the show, I want to tell that story, but also the other side of the coin, which is you can be married and loved or single and free.
Yes.
Right? There are also pros to both directions that you don't get on the other road. And you have to give up something you want desperately for another thing you want just almost not at all more, but a little tiny bit more. You have to give something up.
I agree. And I appreciate you saying this, because what I don't like is the idea that in a world of limitless options when it comes to how you want to dress, where you want to live, what car you drive, what cuisine you like, what music you listen to,
which person to swipe on.
Everybody's like, it's fine. Choose in the way that you want. Make you happy. Here are 100 different careers. Pick the one that's best for you. We live in a world
unless you have no skills like comedy writers, and then you just can only do the one thing.
You do two things at least. So, but it bothers me that there's only one path to living a good life in the eyes of many people, which is get married, settle down, have children, and so on. It's not that that's a bad path. It's just it's not the only one.
Yeah.
And what your story says is that in some way, you can have both of them. You just stage it out. And some people do it in the opposite direction. They start out with the family and then...
But they don't have as much fun.
All
of my relatives that, live in Arizona and voted for Trump and had babies at 22, they're all like, oh, but I'm going to go to Brazil when my kids are out of the house, when I'm, 50 and married. You're like, it's not going to be the same trip. You're going to have I hope they have a different trip than I had, because that's going to be inappropriate otherwise. It's going to be not as cute.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that there is something about, I have a friend who tells a story of being 17, doing a hike on a volcano in Hawaii with his family, and these 70-year-olds who had spent their entire lives working and now were newly retired, and they finally went to Hawaii and they were finally getting a chance to hike the volcano, couldn't make it up.
Too hard. You're old. Yeah.
It's too late. And he made a vow that he was going to do it often, and later.
Yeah. But also, I'm also writing something right now about being old parents, and what it means to be an old parent is to have, really old parents yourself, and that the lovely people who had kids in their 20s have 50-year-old parents to help with the kids.
Yes.
And we have parents in diapers and in old age homes, and that is really hard to have diapers on both sides of you at the same time instead of alternating. It's really hard. There's nobody to help. And so that also is a trade, right? That's a bummer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I want to talk to you a little bit about the travel stuff. So I also wrote a travel log. It's called The Humor Code, and it's laid out in a similar way, which every chapter is a different place, and it's designed to answer a different question related to comedy. Now, your book has done better than mine. It's funnier than mine. So I want to talk to you about some secrets about, if I were to redo the humor code. I mean, if I were to redo the humor code, I actually would pull back on the travel and I would make it much more science-y. That's when I foolishly look at the feedback from the book.
Do that.
People, I know, it's a terrible idea. People want more science, but nonetheless, we wrote it as a travel log, and it's a fun thing. So besides the fact that you're a funnier writer than my co-author and I, one of the things that I think is very striking about your book is how authentic it is. You say things in there
It's all of it.
Must be difficult. Like you talk about reading your boyfriend's journal in it.
Yeah, that wasn't great. That wasn't a great moment.
I know. And obviously it makes for great
cheating.
theater.
I had to tell somebody I cheated on them 10 years earlier because I wrote this book, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's really, I didn't mean to write a memoir, first of all. I kind of backed into it by accident.
Okay, tell me more.
So I had, staffing season comes up and you need writing samples. And people really enjoy reading an autobiographical essay because it's quick and gives you a person's voice really, really fast, right? So people have been saying forever to write down all these travel stories that I was telling at dinner parties, but I didn't really know what the take was. I didn't want to be like just a travel sex bragger, I just didn't know. I feel like often you don't write about something well until you're past it, and you can comment on yourself and laugh at yourself better than when you're in the middle of it, and it actually feels big and real and valid to obsess about the things that later you'll laugh that you obsessed over.
Okay.
So you can't laugh at yourself as much and have a perspective and understand what the journey was as well. So basically staffing season was coming up. I needed to kind of write something to use as a new sample. And what I write about this in the book, what happened coincidentally was that February, before the spring of staffing season, I met my new boyfriend's two sons, which I'd never dated anybody with kids before. And my stepmother died, leaving my 3 little half siblings alone with my elderly dad with Parkinson's. And they were at that point 19, 17, and 11.
Oh, wow.
So I sort of got 5 kids on my lap the same month. And so I had the sudden sense that it was over.
That
everything
you've crossed
was over.
the threshold.
Yeah. And that I better write it down. And so I sat down to write a funny story about a trip. I sat down to just write one. And then it was like a week and I had like 70 pages and 4 trips. And it was just this big hunk that was flowing out of me, I think in sort of a scrapbook sort of way. Like quick before I forget about it. Now that it's over, write it down. Almost like a person does when they're 80 at the end of their life, to pass on their stories to their descendants. And so I slapped, to make it look more legit for staffing, I slapped a title page on the top of it that said excerpts from what I was doing while you were breeding, a memoir, and sent it to my agent. And he said, "Oh, are you writing a book?" And I said, "No, I just wrote these and wanted to make it look legit." And he said, "Well, I think it's a book." And then sent it to a book agent who said, "Yeah, it's a book." And then they helped me put together the proposal, and I took it out, and there was a bidding war, and I picked the people who didn't tell me to change the title because they got it. And then I wrote the memoir. But then as I was writing the memoir, I kept writing kind of David Sedaris style travel stories. And the editor was like, people, when they read a memoir, want to know, they don't want just, a bunch of funny stories. They want to know why you did what you did. What family life led you to make these decisions? What was happening back at home? You have an interesting career. Write about your career. What was going on with these people? And so I backed into suddenly having to dig into really personal, why are you the way you are stuff. And that was a struggle for 2 reasons. One, I felt like who am I at 38? Nobody to write a memoir. I'm not Hillary Clinton. Who wants to read about my thoughts and dreams, right? So I have that kind of insecurity that leads to all of the self-deprecating comic stuff that makes all of us make jokes about ourselves all the time. And then secondly, it was so personal, and so I spent a lot of time really wanting to be honest about it, because while the book is sometimes compared to Eat, Pray, Love, I really didn't want to write Eat, Pray, Love, despite the fact that I related a lot of times to it, because she honestly didn't dig into a lot of things that were really true. She and her husbands were swingers. She never wrote about that, She, very publicly hid her divorce that was happening from the guy who she met in the last chapter of Eat, Pray, Love, because she was about to release a book on marriage.
Yes.
Right? So I really wanted to dig in and be super honest. And so I would honestly literally be sometimes in therapy in the chapters where I was writing about times that I didn't like what I'd been doing. I didn't feel like they were really great choices. Because if you stop liking a narrator in a memoir, you put the book down. You're like, ugh, I hate her. I'm putting it down. And so I wanted to both be really honest, but also have people at least root for me to start making better choices rather than judge me and put the book down. And if you look at the both 5 and 1 star reviews that tend to happen on my book on the Amazon reviews that we don't read, people either had that work for them, like I really admire that she was this honest, and this honesty resonates and suddenly makes me think about exactly how I feel exactly the same way, or they're like, oh my God, she's self-indulgent and slutty,
Yes.
And I think when you write a memoir, you always get like a paragraph about the book where they judge the book, and then another paragraph where they just judge you as a human being, which
Yes.
makes those reviews especially delightful to read. You get to hear that stuff too, just a kind of I don't think I think she's a 1-star person. Like maybe I give her 1 star just for her personality and value on this earth. So I tried to be really honest. And so I always tell people, write a memoir even if you don't show it to another human, because of how much it helps you forgive yourself, I think, and really understand. And also sit down and go, holy cow, I do have actually a lot to say. And I have had a lot of experiences. I kind of sat down going, wow, with the last 10 years, I have friends who have gotten married, made 3 humans, done all these things. And I still am like on another trip, having another boyfriend, having another job, trying to figure out what I'm going to write next, or who I'm going to date next, or where I'm going to go next. And I haven't done anything. I haven't built anything. But then I wrote this book and I was like, oh, look I have done something. Making humans and getting married is not the only way to judge. Have you built anything with your life?
Yes, thank you for saying that, because first of all, there's 9 billion of us, and so it's not that hard to make them, at least. I mean, I think to make them good is hard, but to make them is not that difficult. And so unless it is. I had a really hard time. Well, that's fair. Touche. But I'm saying on average, that kind of thing. So but I would argue
sometimes it costs less than mine cost. Yeah.
Yes. I would my argument, of course, is that no, of course, like you were living a remarkable life. When you think about what is it that the average person does with their life.
Yeah, I was super lucky what I got to do.
That is, like not many people get to go to Hollywood. And, I love living in Los Angeles because it's a city of dreamers. It's a city of people taking a shot. The average person never takes a shot.
Yeah.
And now most fail, but at least they took the shot.
Yeah.
And then the people who take the shot and win, to make it onto into a writer's room, that in of itself is remarkable. And then to layer onto it, leaving the country, like most Americans never leave the country, let alone to go, to the far ends. And so, the fact that you were able, then being able to document it, and in a way that I think, again, this is a playbook for people, for someone who lives in a place that doesn't quite feel like they fit in, is ambivalent about, starting a family, or certainly is like not ready for it now and wants to kind of quote unquote live a little. And so, it's fun hearing you talk about this, and the fact that you were brave enough to share it, because I know as someone who writes and who shares stuff, you invite criticism, and the sweet irony is the very same thing that makes people love what you've done is also the very thing that makes them hate, what you've done. You
definitely realize, I think, when you read enough reviews, that the review has much more to do with the reviewer.
Yes.
Usually, and kind of how what you've done frames what they've done. And, I think that we're all that way. We all have our own, everything is perception. We all judge everything based on what we've experienced and who we are and what we've done, all of that business.
I agree. No, I don't, to be honest, I haven't read many of my reviews for the Humor Code, but I did read some of them because, I want feedback. I want to know, what worked, what didn't work, and so on. And actually the problem with the Humor Code was it's what I call warm tea. It tries to be something for everyone, and as a result is never the thing for anyone, So in a world of people who want hot tea or iced tea, if you try to make everyone happy and serve them warm tea, you don't. I think
Well, I have all kinds of people who criticize the book for, they wanted it to be just a straight travel log and they wanted to hear more about the places.
Yes.
And we're like, why is she obsessively talking about people? And I was really inspired by, I don't know if you've ever read Bruce Chatwin on Patagonia or In Patagonia. I forget what it's called.
Haven't.
It's a travel book from, I think, the maybe 20s or 30s about Patagonia. And I read it in Patagonia in a rattly, windy building. And it kind of changed travel writing because he was one of the first people to write about the people in the places he went to and kind of the culture of the people versus the things that he saw.
I see.
And kind of talking about his own interactions with locals. And that was really, for me, the way that I've always gotten to know a place, that, like, you know, having a romance with a local was as much about getting to get taken to the local places and the person's family and the person's friends and get to, like, find out what it's like to be intimate with somebody from another culture teaches you about the culture and about the place in a way that it doesn't happen when you go see the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, you go to the Taj Mahal. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so, you know, so I write about people and romances for that reason, but I think a lot of people are like, ugh, I thought it was going to be a travel book. It's just about, you know, her obsession with boys or whatever it is. I think people are critical.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, you can't make everyone happy.
That's right.
So,
That's right. You got to just make yourself happy.
So, yeah, so speaking of which, I think I want to talk about two things about this. We can move on to other stuff. But so one is, so speaking of the travel, so suppose a solo is listening, is like, I want to live a more remarkable life. I'm going to go out in the world and travel. Now, you weren't always alone on these trips. Sometimes, you know, obviously you met people in these places, and sometimes you went with your friends.
I talk about how, you know, often the people would come on trips and then they'd get married, and so they'd disappear, and I'd travel alone, and they'd get divorced, and they'd come back around for another trip or two, and they'd get married again before I'd gotten married the first time, and I'd lose them again. So they'd come and go as my adventurer posse. But yeah, the first time that I traveled by myself was when I kind of got single for the first time at 31, because I had 2 long-term relationships in my 20s. And that was really scary. And I went for 3 months to Argentina and got an apartment and got an Argentine cell phone and took Spanish 5 days a week and tango 3 days a week and really plugged myself in and got to know the place pretty intimately. And that was what changed me and what made me addicted to going by myself specifically, because you just meet so many more people when you travel alone. The least people you ever meet is when you travel in a couple. Nobody approaches a couple. If you're alone, especially as a woman alone, people are like, do you want to join us? You're just sitting right there. Come sit with us. You know, wait.
You're approachable.
You know, after this day trip to see elephants, you don't have anybody to have dinner with? Come have dinner with us. And you're approachable. You know, groups of girls, very approachable, right? They meet lots of people. What's fun, actually, I've learned is that having a kid traveling now, that the world opens back up again because everybody wants to talk to you when you have a cute little baby running around. And so you suddenly meet locals that way because you're on the playground. So it's been fun to meet people again. But, you know, traveling for the very first time with my now husband, which is the end of the book, you meet almost nobody.
Yeah, I see. So you have advice for sort of the solo traveler, and you have advice for picking your partner when you're going
very
to
important.
travel.
You don't just take anybody; they can ruin it. Yeah.
So I've written down some of them.
Great. I'm very judgy about what makes a good travel partner. Read them. I don't remember. You tell me.
So one is, and this is a very improv-y thing, is you're open-minded. You say yes to things.
Yes.
And that's important, right?
Very.
So that's
most important.
Yeah, that was number 1 on your list.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes. The person and you should go to places that tourists don't go.
Yes, also important. Not that you avoid necessarily the things that you want to see before you die, but dig around, and that's how you find that's why you need a local.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. I travel a lot, and I travel alone a lot. But my big thing is I'm looking for the cafe. You know, I'm looking for a locals cafe, a comfortable place that, you know, feels like Paris, feels like Rome, feels like Cairo, feels like wherever it is. And then I can that becomes a little bit of a home base of sorts, a place I can journal and I can write and I can read and I can get a good coffee and I can get a bite to eat and sort of at least just soak it in.
Yeah, I would say I do that too. I think that's very smart.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, I'm also replicating a little bit of my Boulder life or my LA life anyways, which I like, and so I'm not trying to escape that part of my life.
Yeah.
So this is one that I might struggle with. So easy sleeping, eating, comfort issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have very, very low tolerance for just like a lot of neediness in terms of what people need. I'm not, I am not a like empathetic, kind, warm, like understanding person when it comes to that. I don't know what that is about me that I could be a lot better as a person in terms of that. I don't have tolerance. Just need everybody to really like not have allergies and just be able to sleep anywhere and just everybody needs to just not have issues, which I know is unfair, very unfair. It's just me.
Yeah, I understand. Look, it certainly makes travel, especially kind of like rustic traveling, a lot easier. For example.
Yeah. And like, again, I'm not going so rustic anymore, that tolerance has gone down too. But especially in the book, I talk a lot about how you can't go to a really fancy hotel by yourself. You don't meet anybody. It's all couples who are fancy and they don't want to do it. So even when I could afford a nicer place, I would usually stay in hostels and just get kind of the private room with its own bathroom that costs $30 instead of $5.
Yes.
But, be there where solo travelers are staying and meet them that way. So somebody who kind of can't do that and only wants to go super fancy, it's a problem. But also the other way, if somebody is in a really different financial position than you are and can only afford super rustic and you'd like to splurge on this something and you can't because they can't do it either, then that's going to bum you out too. So I feel like you have to be in the same space in terms of what your tolerance is and what your budget is.
Yes, and I agree with that. I think that sort of compatibility. We'll get back to the meeting people in a moment. Mm-hmm. So this is another one, and this is related to this, is you talk about letting your travel partner go off and do other things.
Yes.
Right? You don't have to be together for 24/7. They want to see, and I'm the master of this, which is I'm going for a run. You don't need to exercise. You don't want to exercise, but I'm not going to not exercise. Or I really want to go see this museum. I understand why you don't. Go do, you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
I'll see you at 4:00 for happy hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Yes. And so,
especially if they're somebody who, if you've accidentally ended up with somebody who takes a long time to do all of the things that I need them to be doing quickly. Like if there's just sort of like, I'm going to sleep until noon and then I'm going to take a slow bath and then I'm just going to, and you're going insane waiting for them.
Yes.
I've done that too many times. You just have to go, you live you, I'm going to leave.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, to me, there's a few others of these things, like blending in with the culture, going with the flow and so on. To me, there were sort of three overarching elements. And I think that they're useful. They're useful as a single traveler. And they're also useful if you're a single traveler who is bringing other people with you or together. So the first one is like, having some compatibility to begin with. You need some foundation. You see the world in the same way. Your beats in the day are sort of similar. You don't have someone who has very narrow eating needs. And to the degree that you don't have compatibility, you're comfortable saying to each other, I'll see you later. We'll catch up in a mutually compatible fashion. And then you
go have another vegan meal. Go right ahead.
That's right.
I'll see you later.
Yes, I'm going to have, yes.
Right.
I'm going to have more pork. Mm-hmm. And the last one is, how do you treat these places and these people? And a big part of it is, it sounds to me, and I agree with this, is moving beyond being a tourist and moving into the world of being a traveler. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good. I actually do trips sometimes with others. And I did a trip in Barcelona with two friends, both single. He lives in Switzerland and does like pharmaceutical marketing. She's a friend from Boulder who's in Luxembourg teaching, and they didn't know each other. but we all came together, rented an Airbnb, and had a long weekend trip together in Barcelona. And it just worked perfectly.
Awesome.
Because of the things that we're talking about here. And it's a nice alternative. Some people don't like to travel alone, and some people don't have a partner to travel with. That if you can put together that team, it felt like a team in a sense.
For sure. And I mean, I think there's also, if you don't like to travel alone, I feel like there's all of these ways that you don't actually end up traveling alone for very long. Like, for example, signing up for day tours, that are going to take you for 8 hours to do something that you either it's hard to do by yourself because it's a long drive, or because it's an adventure-y sort of thing that requires river rafting or, a guide of some sort, or it's just go for the day with a group.
Yes.
Because you spend 8 hours or 6 hours or something, you all meet each other, and then suddenly you've made friends to have dinner with and go to drinks with, which as a woman is the harder part, dinner and drinks, right? Bars are hard.
Yes.
Harder as a woman by yourself than it is for a man. So I feel like either doing that or an entire trip, like a trekking trip where you're spending, 5 days trekking hut to hut with a group of people. Those are often solo travelers that come together. We did the Milford Trek in New Zealand that was 5 days.
Yes.
And it was almost exclusively single travelers. But I have friends still from all over the world who I've stayed with and who have stayed with me from those 5 days of just walking.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to be 5 minutes behind everybody, you walked alone all day and saw them in the lodge. And if you wanted to pick up the pace a little bit and just, or slow down the pace to be walking with a group, you could chat with people all day. And it was this perfect meld. So I feel like little tours like that aren't driving you around, from location to location sort of thing, but either day trips or adventure trips like that, I think are a really good option for solo travelers who are nervous.
Yes. I'll add 2. So one is I will sometimes get on Meetup when I'm in a place, and I'll look for something that I want to do. Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's writing. There's often writing groups in any major city. And they meet in the evening, and everybody introduces themselves. And you do some bout of writing.
Awesome. I've been so sad that all of my singlehood happened before apps. Like, God, would life have been so much easier and different if I could have Tindered anywhere in the world, or Meetup, or any of the things that you can do now. It's so awesome.
Yeah, that's the second thing I was going to ask you is your book was pre-dating app, so almost everybody you met was in real life.
All of them.
Yes.
Everybody, yeah.
And so, nowadays, the other thing is you can land in a place and fire up an app.
I know.
And
so easy. It's crazy. Of course, the flip side of that, I hear, is that nobody talks to anybody in real life anymore. That the pickup scene has become so online that people are actually afraid to do that scary thing of walk up to somebody and say hi.
Yes.
And it's so much easier to swipe. And so people have stopped walking up to people and saying hi, which is too bad.
Yeah, that's I think the downside of it all.
Yeah.
The upside is that you can, if you're interested in dating, that's a possibility, because most of these places there's some app that probably is active.
Yeah, I had to do really hard things. Like, I remember being at a cafe in Argentina and just eating alone and being in love with a guy sitting at a table with another person, and I wrote a note with my name and phone number on it and dropped it on the table as I left, sprinted out of the building. It was so scary, but that's the kind of thing you had to do. It was so much harder. Swiping is delightfully easy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like in real life. I like meeting people in real life because, first of all, they look like their pictures.
Sure.
Because...
And if there's chemistry or not.
There they are, yes.
I did a lot of online dating, and I feel like 95% of the first dates, even if they looked exactly like their picture, there just wasn't chemistry.
Yes.
And you waste so much time.
Yeah, there's just something about even seeing how someone moves and seeing how they're, they interact and so on. As a man, I will tell you that it's a difficult world in real life now. And the problem is it's impossible to differentiate the woman who wants you to approach her and the woman who doesn't want you to approach her. And pre-dating apps, the women who didn't want you to approach her just knew that's how the world was. And now, there's some trepidation. There's even more trepidation because, you want to be respectful. You want people to be comfortable. You don't want to make things awkward. And also, by the way, people are terrible about being approached because it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And so they don't have the right script, and they don't exactly know how to say no in a way that feels right, and so on.
Yeah, I know. Everything is very complicated right now.
Yeah. And so I have done my version of your note in real life, and it looks something like this. I just walk up to someone and I say, I just want to say I noticed you, and if you'd like to meet for coffee sometime, I'd be happy to buy you a cup of coffee. And I give them my card. And then I get the hell
run away.
out of there.
Yeah, run away.
As quick as possible. Sometimes you hear, sometimes you don't. But it's my only solution, to be honest, that is like, it's as close.
Then you're not bothering them if they don't want to be approached. You're getting out of there.
They don't have to say no to your face. Yeah. They don't even, like that. All they have to do is say, okay, that kind of thing. Totally it's reasonable. As close to replicating Bumble in real life. In real life.
Yeah, I know. It's really hard. And I for whatever reason, I'm not a shy person, but come hither eye contact, I am really, really bad at. It's the hardest thing in the world for me to consider doing. Somehow it's easier for me to do what seems like a bigger move of throwing a note in someone's lap.
Yes.
Than just giving them long sustained eye contact. It's so hard for me. There was a time when I was walking through a bar once, just sort of scanning the crowd and just having my walkabout, sort of seeing who I saw, seeing who saw me, all of that. And a woman who didn't know me, as I was walking by her, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And she said, "Oh, you just looked really sad."
Aww.
And I'm like, oh my God, my sexy eyes look like sad eyes. I thought I was doing sexy face, but apparently it looks so troubled that a stranger felt the need to intervene to make sure I didn't do something horrible to myself, perhaps. I don't know. So just write a note. I write a note and throw it in the blast.
So, it is interesting. This is good advice so I have a single friend. She is stunningly beautiful. And we were talking about this very thing, which is most women in a gym do not want the men talking to them.
Right.
She does. Okay. And so I said, so do guys at your gym talk to you? She goes, no, not at all. And I say, do you make eye contact and smile at the men who you want to talk to you? She goes, no, of course not.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
I know, but I just say, it's if you think about it, think about what he has to do.
Yeah.
And and so it's hard to make the eye contact and smile, but the problem is this is the guys you want. This is, by the way, this is not guys or gals. This is the person that you want to approach you and that you want to talk to is socially skilled.
It's a super hard thing to do. I read once that they did a study of what it took to get a person to cross the room and speak to you for the first time. And I'm going to get this wrong, but I feel certain that the number was you had to have sustained eye contact with a smile for 3 seconds, and you had to do it 15 times. What? 15 times. That's how many times. I think in this case, it was women making the eye contact towards men.
Okay.
And it took 15 sustained 3-second smile eye contacts. So you can see that perhaps why I have that. I'm loaded with that in my head.
Yes.
I'm walking through the bar. I know I have to do that. It sounds insanely hard to do. That's probably why I looked like I was going to burst into tears. Yes. Probably. That's so hard. But I get it. It's hard to walk across the room and say hi.
Well, and so if I could put my behavioral scientist hat on for a moment, I'll explain why. And that is that we are wired to not do that. So essentially, if you think about historically, we lived in very small communities. Right? So humans were very, very small communities. And so the reputational effects in a small community are not trivial, which means
to live with the embarrassment forever. Yeah.
I approach this person to have some intimate relationship with her or him. I'm rejected. Everybody knows that I've been rejected.
We have to all hang out forever now.
And it hurts my chances with the
right.
1.5 other decent options
right.
in the community. So everything is very subtle and delicate and so on. But now we live in a world of, we're in LA County. There's 20 million people here. You go to Argentina, you go to the Dominican Republic, you go to Moscow. You're a stranger in a strange land. There are no reputational effects that exist. And yet, for the average person, they still have this wired in set of inhibitions, which is, oh my God, what if they say no? Even worse, oh my God, what if they snicker and laugh at and point at me?
Well,
of course, most people don't do that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I feel like the Kristin adjacent, who's sluttier or whatever word we want to use, more
promiscuous,
more sexually open, let's call it. In other countries, it's exactly that. Even in a city of 20 million people, or even in my own country, I think I have that ancient, tiny group fear.
Yes, the monkey mind, I call it.
Yeah, I'm pretty great at approaching people and throwing it out there as soon as I leave the United States of America, because it's just, again, there's something about it that just feels like a fearless thing. And that's probably why American girls have this reputation abroad as being sort of like an easy, open crowd, is that I do think there is this like, what the hell, I'm in another country thing that happens when you leave. I'm like, I think that you know, they think that we're the same way at home, which maybe plenty of people are. I'm not. I'm an example of somebody who's different outside of the country than I am at home in that regard. I think
the idea is this: we all have different identities. You know, the way I behave when I'm teaching a class of MBAs is different than when I'm out, with my mates.
Sure.
And so, I think that's often the case. So, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, so I like this idea of thinking deliberately about what kind of traveler you're going to be, what is that you want out of these experiences. Some people don't. Obviously, they're not looking to spice up their sex life. Some of them are looking to have a profound cultural experience and to see an ancient world and so on. But I do think that regardless of which of those things or both that you're doing as a traveler,
go to Israel for both. That's the place for both.
Fair. That's good. Yes. Go to Jordan to see beautiful sights, and go to Israel to see
Israel for beautiful sights too. The culture and the history and the
Tel Aviv
and the like spiritual part of it, even if you're not religious, is outrageous in Jerusalem.
That's fair.
Also, they are the most sexually aggressive people anywhere in the world. If they are not religious, they are the most sexually aggressive people of anywhere in the world, I would say.
I'll make a case
next to Italy.
I'll make a case for Tel Aviv as a great city.
Yeah.
It's a city by the beach, wonderful food.
Yeah.
It's young, it's fashionable, it's
fantastic.
warm, it's great. So I want to talk about, when you live a remarkable life, I think one of the interesting things that with the notion of solo is when you take the opportunity and you say, I'm going to make art. I'm going to launch a business. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to use this time and energy and money that's not being dedicated to children or whatever it might be, has this ironic effect of making you a potentially better partner. And so now being married and being a mom, do you find that to be the case? Like, do you find that your stage in life that you're in now has been enhanced by living this remarkable solo life in your 20s and 3/4 of your 30s? For
sure. I mean, there's a few reasons. I mean, one is my husband is very sweet and says he wishes we met earlier, and I'm like, no, we wouldn't be together then, for sure. Like, I wouldn't have made a good choice earlier, which is him. I would have made worse choices. So that's the good news, is that
you were more ready for this style of relationship.
Yeah, I knew better how to make a better choice, so that was a big deal. But also, just I really thought I was going to be the person who said, who's going to take my 3-month-old so I can go to Thailand for 3 weeks. I really thought that was going to happen. Either that, or that I was just going to go hike Nepal with the 3-month-old on my back, which is not even where you put 3-month-olds.
Yeah,
you put them on your front.
I was going to say.
Exactly. But these are the kinds of images I had in my head. And what has been a real I don't know if I want to call it a struggle, because it honestly hasn't been a struggle. It's just been a kind of awakening that makes me go, I have to figure some things out, is that I didn't want to do either of those things. That I didn't, she's over 3 years old. I took one 3-night trip last year for the first time that I forced myself to take, because I thought it's definitely time to go on a girl trip. And maybe my husband and I have gone away twice for 1 or maybe 2 nights. I just don't want to leave her, and I forced myself and do it. We have taken her to Spain and to Ireland and to Mexico and to New York, and we've done that, which is good, kind of, but also is just exhausting. I cried in Ireland a few times this trip over why are we, I'm so tired and sad and want this to be over. At one point I thought we had 4 days left and I'd forgotten a whole city and we had 6 days left, and I just started to cry. And I'm a person who spent several $1,000s in my life on change fees for airlines because I'm extending my trip.
Yes.
Often I'll pay that change fee 3 times on the same trip because I'm like, nope, not ready to go yet. Nope, not ready to go. A 3-week trip to New Zealand turned into 6 weeks.
Yes.
This is what I do. I was like, what do we need to pay to go home 2 days early? I'm going to die. So, do we want to keep traveling with her or not yet? It's hard. It's going to get easier. But that being said, all of the resentment that I feel like I would have when my friends go off on safari and I don't go because my child would get eaten, and I also don't want to go on safari and leave her here. I think that would be big if I hadn't done the adventures already, and I feel like having had the experiences already is what makes it okay that I'm not wanting to do them all. And they're still having adventures and we're still doing some stuff, but it's really different, and I didn't know it was going to really change as much. I always said I was not going to be the people who gave up and just went to Hawaii for 6 years when you have kids and just go to a hotel, because it's just not my kind of travel. But man, is it hard to be hopping around with a person who's screaming at you about putting shoes on, taking shoes off, and just getting to the train on time and getting to the plane on time and checking in and checking out. And you're on a little boat with people and she's screaming and you're ruining their time. And it's a lot.
I know this because I see those people.
Yeah. And I mean, she's queen of the pubs. Like, this child could dance. Like, an old drunk Irishman gave her all of the money from his pockets because she was dancing so hard and drumming so hard in a little trad sesh. But still, she's 3.
That's cute.
It sucks.
I get it, yeah.
They ruin vacations, let's be honest. They make some things better. They ruin vacations and flights and dinners at restaurants.
Yes.
They ruin them.
Yeah. So you're saying there's some, what I hear you saying is there's some ease that you have that
the letting of things go that aren't happening right now for a little while. I think I'd be really sad and resentful.
You're like, I'm in Ireland. I don't want, why screw this up?
Yeah.
I see. That makes good sense. So I have one other question about that's related to your comedy writing, but before we go kind of off that, is there? So it's been a while since this book has come out, and you've settled into
6 years.
in this new life. I'm curious if there's any more insights that you've had about how people have reacted to it. Like, I don't think that there are that many good resources for single people, single women, that provide an alternative narrative. Like, I mean, obviously you had Sex in the City, was obviously a big deal and so on. But I'm just curious about the kind of attention, feedback you've gotten. I mean, we've talked a little bit about some of how polarizing it is, but I'm just curious if there's anything more to it that you didn't anticipate, or just sits with you as you reflect on it.
Well, the joy of it has been that I still am all the time getting people tweeting pictures of my book on their knees next to a cocktail on a beach, all over the world.
Nice.
And that people are finding it in, dog-eared copies in hostels all over the world and sending me,
I'm getting
pictures
like
of them.
goosebumps.
Yeah,
That's nice.
It's very wonderful. And along with that, people saying, I'm here right now by myself for the first time ever because I read your book, and people really doing that a lot and telling me about it a lot is pretty magical. Mm-hmm. There's also this amazing thing that happens that tells me a big story, which is there's big, I sell the same number of books every single week. That's apparently the unusual thing. It wasn't a gigantic, huge seller, but I've sold the same number of books every week for 6 years, which is apparently not a thing.
Is that like a referral-based model?
I think so. Yeah. And so it's added up to, 25 or 30 printings in 5 languages it's been translated into and all these things, because I think it's just like the same women pass, the same people are saying to somebody else, read it. And I'm also getting a lot of, I got it 8th, I'm the 8th person to get this copy, and that's been fun. But there's these spikes that happen in book sales that are not the exact same number. And it happens in June when people graduate, usually from college probably, and people buy it before they go on a summer vacation or after they graduate and are kind of going to start a new chapter. Happens at Christmas, which makes me happy that people are giving it as presents.
Yes.
And it happens on January 1st, which makes me think that a lot of people broke up or are sad or trying to have a New Year's resolution, start fresh situation, and think of my book as part of that, which is amazing. And there's a spike on Valentine's Day, which is girls buying it for their girlfriends as it's okay, don't be sad that you're single. And so that story that it tells me about how women who are reading it are relating to it, which is mostly women, let's be honest.
Yeah. I enjoyed it, but it was not written for me.
Yeah, it's mostly women. It makes me so happy that is part of the story. I Skype with book clubs who read it, and I went to Northwestern, and I Skyped with a book club in June that happened to be a group of Northwestern seniors who chose the book before they found out that I went to Northwestern, and then when they saw that, they reached out to me, and so I Skyped with them, and it was the week before they were all graduating, and it was a group of these women and then a couple of their moms who were already in town for graduation that also read it and came to the book club that I got to Skype with. And it turned out that one of the women literally lived in my senior year house. And so they took a picture of all of them in their caps and gowns on my porch from my senior year and sent it. And that was amazing. And it was all of these, women about to go travel by themselves or try to figure out how in God's name to get into Hollywood, because it's Northwestern's a lot of RTVF, radio, TV, film people. That dialogue with women going through that in their lives has been amazing. But it's also been, book clubs of people who had kids and are married, and it's just fun to read about a different life. And I think they get to settle happily into reading about my angsty, lonely times and feel better about their choices. Everybody can find a way to feel good about their choices, I think, depending on which pages you read.
Yes.
So that's been a joy. And in terms of, there have been a lot of people who have tried to get me to adapt it and option it and do it that way. And I think especially right now, there's been another weird wave of movie studios kind of all looking for their quote unquote next Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes.
And I think that there is definitely a moment for women in this very empowered, place of go do your thing that isn't related to marriage and kids, that it's speaking to. And again, that because you talked about how there aren't a lot of playbooks and a lot of other narratives that aren't a rom-com, that aren't about leading to the happy ending. When I talk about trying to do it as a book, as a movie, I really don't want to end with marriage and kids, but I will say that what happened in real life, I've now been thinking of as kind of an ending that maybe wouldn't feel like a sellout to me, which was I finally went on my first international trip in, I think, 15 years with my then boyfriend, now husband. And what happened to have happened was that the new passport that I had to get right when I took my very first solo trip to Argentina, and it was this picture of kind of me sweaty, kind of after a night out with a young punk rocker, taking in my passport photo. That passport got filled up in the prior trip before I went on an international trip with my new boyfriend, and so I literally had to get a new passport and put aside the passport that had been filled up with my single girl trips.
I see.
And get a new stamp, somewhere with him. And I feel like us in Cambodia getting a stamp in a passport with somebody instead of alone maybe is going on adventures with somebody versus stopping the adventures and going home. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's an ending I feel okay about.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. I have to admit, I've spent too much time thinking about this very question. Uh-huh. Because someone even told me before I started reading the book, it doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to turn out, kind of thing.
What did they think it was going to be? Just me single forever?
Well, you know what I mean? It's, it's true. Like
Or Father Juan probably moved to Argentina.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You know what I mean? Or it's a to be continued. You know what I mean? It's this sort of open story where you come to peace. You come to inner peace, right? Obviously, you come to inner peace and a comfort. Not only that you become comfortable in these other countries, but you become comfortable in your own skin and you become comfortable in your own life.
Well, it is that.
Here.
It just happens to go along with meeting somebody, yeah.
Yeah, but my point is you can still put a bow on the end of it with, and so.
Yeah.
I wish I could say it. I don't know the answer to it.
That's why the TV show version works better, is you can live in it. It's
Sex and the City-ish more than it is Trainwreck.
Right.
And so... or
because I hope I wasn't a train wreck. I hope
but the movie Trainwreck,
exactly. But she did kind of need to fix some things, right?
Yeah, she needed to fix some things, but then she also, Trainwreck is a reverse rom-com. It's just every other rom-com you've ever seen, except the female plays the male role and the male plays the female role.
Right.
It's a very funny movie and it works, kind of thing.
It was.
But so I don't know. I mean, look, I think as I like to say, just keep pounding on it.
Thank you.
And something will happen. It seems like I don't know. I'm kind of glad I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, good. All right, I'll just find it. I have to just find it.
No, because it would be. I don't know. I think. Here's the thing: is the fact is that you are tussling with it is kind of enough for me.
All right. Okay. Good.
In the sense of like as a fan,
efforts,
as a consumer, as someone like. It's just like, it's just not an obvious. And look, third acts are the hardest acts to write.
Sure.
And so I get it. Mm-hmm. All right, couple quick things, and then we'll wrap up here.
Yeah.
So, you talk about the Writers Guild strike in the book, and I wanted to get any job worth doing is difficult. I believe. I think these comedy writing jobs are good jobs, especially compared to other comedy jobs.
Mm-hmm. You mean like writing sitcoms?
Writing sitcoms, you know what I mean? Like there's it's a robust work environment, it's smart people, there's lots of laughs. Yeah, it's a grind. Yeah, it's uncertain. You know what I mean? I get it. Mm-hmm. But also it's like to me, writers make Hollywood go. Mm-hmm. They're the engine. We tend to think about stars, but really it's writers that make Hollywood go. And the best argument for that is when the writers decide to strike. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts, you lived through that. I was away.
Maybe about to live through another one this year. It's very exciting stuff.
It might happen.
And without agents, because none of us have agents right now, because we all had to fire our agents collectively last April. So it's a very exciting time. Mm-hmm. I'm very happy I have an overall deal and I'm safe either way, but that's only until May.
Okay.
And then I'll see what happens next. And there's a lot of people without deals who need people helping to find them jobs. And it's possible that they're going to live through a year of having no one help them find a job, only to come up against a strike this spring.
Yes.
So it's a very scary time.
And, so for people who aren't familiar with the Writers Guild Association strike, this was 2007? 2008. Mm-hmm.
Well, 7, 8, yes. Both.
It's like shows got canceled. The late night shows started going into reruns. Like you just...
People who sold pilots, they just rescinded the sale.
Material dries up. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how beautiful the actors are if you don't have someone writing the words.
No. I lost an overall deal.
You did?
It was canceled it. Yeah, it was a very expensive year.
Do you feel that though, again, I'm a big believer in you pay a price now for benefits later?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel
and benefits for the next generation too. I mean, I think that a lot of what happens when you strike and you take the bullet is because somebody took the bullet and got us pension and health care, in the last generation.
I see.
So it's a lot. Like what's about to happen is to figure out residuals for streaming, which is most things right now and is going to be everything soon. Network TV is dying very quickly, and cable is, who knows even what that's going to be. So that's what the big push is going to be for the next negotiation that may turn into a strike, because the streaming wars are all beginning with all of the services. There's going to be, in 1 year even, there's going to be twice as many. So figuring that out, if we don't figure it out now, there will be no residual stream to keep us all afloat and the next generation afloat.
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it goes well. I think it's, in the world of like economics and so on, what you're often looking for is what they call a shock. Like there's something random happens and then you see how the world reacts. Like it's sort of a natural experiment of sorts. And so, I think for a lot of people, they don't recognize the value of writing. They don't understand how difficult it is and how important it is. And so it's something like this that then shines a light on how you joke you can't do anything else, but I joke most people can't do what you can do. And
luckily, we all have different skills,
yes.
right? Yeah, you spend, again, I lived in a hospital for 3 months and watching nurses up close and what they will do all day, every day, and can somehow stomach is like, we're different creatures. We're like almost not the same species. And thank God, somehow it all shook itself out that everybody's willing to do something and collectively all the jobs get done. It's kind of a miracle.
Yes, or at least it filters down, you know. So last question, and this is a question I always ask for I'm Not Joking, is what are you reading, watching, or listening to that really stands out?
Well, this year I was obsessed with Pen 15 and Big Mouth. I'm a big lover of things about middle school. Middle school was horrible for me and poignant, and everyone, I think, in the world. I just watched 2 stepsons go through 7th grade, and collectively everyone in the house agrees 7th grade is the worst year
brutal.
Of everybody's life for every single human. So those 2 shows I think are hilarious and poignant and amazing. What else is amazing right now? I just watched The Boys, which I really thought was a really fun anti-superhero show.
Okay.
I live with a superhero writer, so that was one that crossed over for both of us. I'm just starting The Affair, which I'm enjoying as a storytelling experiment, because you hear from both sides of the aisle, basically, the man and the woman's different perspectives. And like we were talking about earlier, I'm kind of interested in how we see things, the same events, really differently. What else? I'm reading our friend Joel Stein's book right now, In Defense of Elitism, which I think is super smart, and I agree with. Joel's
a previous guest on I'm Not Joking.
That's right. He's a funny guy.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of things.
For someone who's producing a lot of content you're consuming, that's good.
I just helped produce a pilot for Hulu called The Ms. Pat Show, starring this comedian named Ms. Pat, and she has a book called Rabbit that I'll plug that is her life story that is one of the most remarkable life stories you will read. It's her growing up on the streets of Atlanta, in a really, 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 really hard environment. And the story is kind of an amazing one in terms of how a lot of Black girls and women are growing up and living here in such a different way than so many of us. It's very, very heartbreaking, but very funny too. She's very funny. Check her out.
Cool. All right. These will all be in the exhibits, of course. Kristin Newman, thank you so much for doing this. This is a first. I've never done a dual podcast.
I've never crossed over before.
Yes.
This is exciting. Hi to everybody.
So, to me, solo is, I know what I'm getting from I'm Not Joking. I know who listens and I know what the type of listeners like and so on. I'm putting solo out there and I'm just putting it out there to see, is it capturing something? And to be honest, I'm putting it out there with the hope that it captures something like your memoir.
Oh, good.
Captured. And so in that way, you've been the perfect guest and a delight. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. This was enjoyable.
Cheers.
Good luck.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.